All right. So what do you guys want to talk about? As we enter a new episode of the J Area podcast, quite a few things have happened in the last, week or so since we last spoke. We'll go ahead and address the elephant in the room as of this recording, which will, kind of date when it was recorded. Tom Brady retires from the NFL. Finally, he says for good. After 23 seasons, 7 championships, 10 Super Bowl appearances, Tom Brady officially retires from the league. In the midst of all this, rumor and speculation of where he would go next, because everyone knew that his time with the Buccaneers was, coming to a close. Tom Brady, to open this episode, I certainly think is, without question, the greatest of all time. It's hard to dispute that when you have 7 championships, when you have multiple MVPs, Super Bowl MVPs, the number one in passing yards, passing touchdowns in regular season and in postseason history. What this man was able to accomplish over the last 23 years is nothing short of spectacular. I saw somewhere that if you were to divide his career into 3 separate careers, his 20s, his 30s, and his 40s, you could argue he has 3 Hall of Fame careers. Even at the twilight of his career, he was still breaking records. He was still playing at a high level. I know some people can look at his last year with Tampa Bay, and you can see some signs of regression in terms of the strength in his passes, the accuracy of his passes. It did take him a while to get in sync with the Mike Evans, but you can tell it was still better than half of the league out there. And I think that's important to recognize, that when you have great ones still playing at a high level, you have to learn to appreciate them. And as we're talking about that, LeBron James is a mere, I believe, 89 points away from breaking the all-time scoring record that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar has held for decades at this rate. And I think that's really important to open up this episode with, is appreciate the greatness that you see in front of you, because you may not see it for much longer. We don't know how much time we have on this earth, and we certainly don't know how much time they have in their careers. So it's important to recognize and to appreciate the great things that we're able to witness and appreciate in life. Tom Brady. The story of Tom Brady is one that really encompasses everything that an underdog story could be. And it's funny to call him an underdog now, knowing what he was able to accomplish and what he's recognized for. But to realize he was the 199th pick in the 2000 draft. He was not supposed to be the starter for the Patriots. Drew Bledsoe had just received a huge contract that would have led them to hopefully the success that they would have sustained anyway. But that wasn't the case because of the injury he sustained against the New York Jets. And eventually having Tom Brady as the backup, beating the Rams in the Super Bowl, and then going on to have this illustrious career. Tom Brady is a story that I think you have to tell if you're talking about the history of the NFL. In order to determine what truly is a resume of a Hall of Famer, I think obviously you need the accolades, you need the awards, you need the championships. But I also think an important part of it is, can you tell the story of the NFL with or without them? And the fact is, with Tom Brady, you just can't. There are so many stories, whether it's the 17-0 Patriots that lost in the Super Bowl, whether it was Eli Manning doing the unthinkable and beating the Patriots twice, whether it was the 28-3 comeback against the Falcons, whether it was the COVID, stricken year in 2020 when he went with the Buccaneers and they won the championship, whether it was, defeating the Rams in his first season as the New England Patriots the year after the September 11th attacks. So many things, and I know I'm missing more. The Tuck Rule game against the Raiders. There are so many other events in the NFL's history that involve Tom Brady. I, for one, let's go ahead and get it out of the way. There will never be another Tom Brady. And some people can make that comparison of like, oh, this guy's going to be the next Brady, or this guy's Brady-esque. There will never be another Tom Brady. In terms of the story of how he came into the league and how he was able to achieve the level of success that he has, there will never be any replication of it. And I think we got to get that out of the way. Because, of course, you're going to have certain pundits and experts try to tell you that, oh, this guy's going to be the next one. No, they're going to be the first of them. Tom Brady's story is an anomaly. It was not supposed to work out this way. But 23 years later, and he's the undisputed GOAT. Only one guy I can say might rival him, and maybe I'm biased, but I think it's Jerry Rice. But if we're going just strictly quarterback, without a doubt, it's Tom Brady. And I'm a Joe Montana fan. But Tom Brady, what he was able to achieve in his career, it should not go without mention. There's a reason why that he's called the GOAT. He's just the greatest of all time. He's a winner at all facets of life. And now we're going to be able to see him on Fox, maybe next year. I don't know how soon the contract begins. But to be able to have that level of intelligence and experience at our disposal, every week on Fox is so beneficial to everyone. Not only him, because it gives him an opportunity to continue to express his love for the game, because it's very apparent of his love of the game, but to share that knowledge with the young people, whether it's, future athletes or future sports writers or just fans of the game, to be able to have that at that availability, it's invaluable. I've always felt that what's the point of knowing things, gaining knowledge and experience if you're not going to share with others who can also learn from them? And that's what Tom Brady gives to future NFL stars and future fans of the NFL because of his 23-year-long career. He has experience in all facets. It's funny because there was a time where I was not a Brady fan, and I think it was around Deflategate, in 2014, 2015, when they had went to the Super Bowl and defeated the Seahawks. And it wasn't like, oh, I didn't like him because he beat the Seahawks. On the contrary, I loved it because they beat the Seahawks. But I didn't get the hype, you know what I mean? And what really turned it around for me was Super Bowl 51, when they had faced Atlanta. And I can remember watching that game and seeing it get out of hand, and it was 28-3, of course, everyone knows that. And I remember speaking to my father and my brother and them saying, like, oh, it's over. Atlanta won the Super Bowl. Tom Brady's going to lose. And I'll never forget telling them, you know what? No, I don't believe it. I'll believe it when I see it. They still got Brady. And going off of what I knew and what I've seen from Brady and the Patriots, I thought, there's always a chance. There's always a chance. And so I had friends, I remember telling me that they were watching the game, and after suffering such a big deficit, they just turned it off and they went about their day, or they took a nap or whatever. And no, while they were doing their thing, my family that is, while they're doing their thing, walking around the house, eating, hanging out, I'm just watching the game, just in awe, because with every drive that had taken place, whether it was the New England defense trying to make a stop, whether it was the New England offense trying to score, every drive was just so crucial. And the moment Julian Edelman had made that acrobatic catch where, it bobbles in the air and he's able to catch it at the last second before it falls to the ground, I think that was when I knew, like, dude, like, come on. There's no way. I'm a big believer in things happening for a reason and signs and stuff like that. And when that had happened and Edelman had caught it, I thought, there's no way they're losing this game. Because that could have easily have been an incompletion. It easily could have been bobbled into an interception. It could have been dropped. But the fact that he had caught that, it's just, there's no way. There's no way they're going to lose this game. So they march down the field, and Tom Brady is able to lead them to, a tie, of course. And they're going into overtime. And them going into overtime, at that point you're thinking, well, Atlanta could still win the game, right? But again, what I see in football is it's a game of momentum. Sports in general, it's just all about momentum. And all the momentum had left Atlanta, and it was now in the firm grasp of the New England Patriots. It was their game to lose at that rate. Because going into, the fourth quarter, it was whatever, you know what I mean? Like, they knew the odds were against them, and they should lose that game. And Atlanta was riding high and confident and thinking they were about to win their first Super Bowl in franchise history with an offensive coordinator named Kyle Shanahan, who I'll get to in a short moment. But then when it came time to go ahead and flip the coin for to decide who would get the possession in overtime, and New England wins it. It was right there and then. I could have put all the money in the world that they weren't going to lose that game, because you're giving Tom Brady the ball to start the overtime period with the wave of momentum that they have. The Atlanta defense was already depleted and they were already deflated. How ironic is that, going back to Deflategate? But seeing that game, it is one of the greatest performances I think I've ever seen. And I'm not just giving Tom Brady credit, but also just giving the Patriots their due, because that was tremendous. It was truly one of the greatest comebacks of all time. It was the first Super Bowl to ever reach the overtime period. And just special. Another Tom Brady moment that really strikes me. It might have been the same weekend. It was either that one or Super Bowl 52. But I want to say it was Super Bowl 51 when a reporter was talking about, and I think it might have been a kid. It might have been a little kid that asked him this question, but talking about like who are some of Tom Brady's heroes and who he looks up to. And you could just see the smile on his face. And he said, who's my hero? And he got emotional. And he just, with a tear in his eye and just a slight smile, he's like, my dad. And I think that was really another turning point, seeing the person, because I can totally resonate with that and how he felt, because I feel a similar way to that, to my own father and to my own mother, and looking at them and what they've done for me and my siblings and throughout my life. Seeing that human side and that humility that Tom Brady was able to express, because he could have said anything, but to see the raw emotion come off in a touching way, I suppose, really connected me to him on a human basis, and not so much as a football. So those were two of the biggest moments that resonate with Tom Brady. Of course, in recent years, he's been connected with the 49ers, who have had a quarterback issue for the last few years in terms of health. And that was actually another talking point heading into this offseason for the Niners, of whether or not they would pursue Tom Brady. But he wasted no time and was real quick to nip it in the bud and say, no, you know what? No, I'm going to retire. And again, congratulations to Tom Brady on a wonderful career, a historic career, and certainly one that others will try to emulate but never be able to replicate. Tom Brady, thank you again for 23 years. But moving on, where one career ends, a season ends as well. And this past weekend, the San Francisco 49ers suffered I don't even want to say it was a crushing defeat to the Philadelphia Eagles, because it never really got going. That first drive, when clearly it wasn't a catch. It was an incomplete catch, but we didn't throw the challenge flag to stop that play. The Philadelphia Eagles went up 7-0. And then following that, our quarterback, Mr. Irrelevant, who proved to be quite relevant, he still has a shot of winning Offensive Rookie of the Year. Brock Purdy sustained an injury on his elbow, his throwing elbow, which would later be diagnosed as a UCL injury that would have him out for half the year and basically all of offseason. After that, seeing Brock Purdy getting hurt. And, prior to that, Fred Warner even suffered a stinger like on the second play. Nick Bosa had gotten, kind of dinged up early on as well. Just seeing that, it brought back so many memories of like 2020 when we were injured at like literally every position. But the moment Brock went out, you can feel the energy in our house just leave, like a balloon, just getting the air sucked out of it. It was just so deflating. And I know my friends and my coworkers, they also like to joke about it, and they were messaging me throughout the game, and I ignored it all until like halftime. But it was devastating, man. Because once we see Josh Johnson come into the game, and that's our fourth quarterback, I'm thinking Josh Johnson hasn't played any meaningful football in years, and we just re-signed him, because he's been to like 14 different franchises in the last 13 years. We had just signed him a couple months ago after the Jimmy injury, because of course Brock was in and we needed a backup. So Josh Johnson entering that game, I knew it spelled disaster and it wasn't going to go nowhere. And it's fine now, because to be fair, our fourth string quarterback should not be in the game of an NFC championship, but that's just the reality of our season. So the moment that he goes down, and I missed the play, I don't know what I was looking at. I was watching the game, but I wasn't looking at Johnson. I think I was looking at the ball, and to see him suffer what looked like a concussion because they had to take him out to, of course, for protocol. And it's a sight I'll never forget, and I hope to never see again. But to see Christian McCaffrey and Kyle Juszczyk, switching helmets, like the quarterback helmet, trying to get the comms going, reading the plays, and just, it was a scramble, man. Like, to have two emergency quarterbacks like that, it's just, if you would have told me at the beginning of this season that, hey, you're going to make the NFC Championship, I think great, tremendous. We have a shot to make the Super Bowl because of last year. We can use that experience and move forward and break through and finally get to the Super Bowl, right? But then you tell me, yeah, but there's one caveat. Your quarterback is going to be Christian McCaffrey. What? Because at the time, Christian McCaffrey was with the Panthers. So, just a wild season. A season I'm grateful for because it was fun. I thought this was one of the best teams we've had in years, given the offense and the defense. And it's going to be difficult to move forward. But just to wrap up the game real quick, we had scored 7 points, which I don't think is a reflection of our offense at all, because it's tough when you don't have anyone to throw the ball. And the defense, I think, just let the game slip away. The Eagles are a tough team, and I think they are very capable of winning the Super Bowl this year. It was just, again, a deflating loss, and just a real disappointing and anticlimactic end to what was a fantastic season. We're in the running for Coach of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, Comeback Player of the Year, Offensive Rookie of the Year, Assistant Coach of the Year, and to come one game short and really have nothing to show for it, it's really rough. It's rough being a San Francisco fan right now in this household, and I'm sure other Niner fans can also resonate with that. But I saw a tweet somewhere that said, it wasn't as tough as a loss for the Niner fans because we're all dead inside. And I just thought that was so funny, especially in recent years, because the fandom between like myself and my father are two different fandoms. He was able to see, witness multiple Super Bowl wins, the greats like Jerry Rice, Steve Young, Joe Montana, Bill Walsh, I can go on and on. Whereas like my brother Jared and I, all we know is the Kyle Williams fumble. We know the Super Bowl loss to the Ravens. We know the tip pass against Seattle. We know, 2019 losing to Kansas City, last year losing to the Rams, and now, this year with just a bunch of injuries, man. It's a wild ride. So we move forward. And again, I wish the best of luck to the Eagles and the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm hoping for a good game. I personally don't like either team. I have a vendetta and a grudge against both teams. If you had to tell me to pick one right now, I'll probably rock with the Eagles. But at the same time, I won't be mad at the Chiefs one because I like Andy Reid. My brother may not like Patrick Mahomes, with a valid reason, I suppose. But I could see either team winning. Right now, I'm leaning Eagles, but I'm not gonna go ahead and say that's my final prediction. I'll wait till the week before to finalize my prediction. But it should be a good game. Another thing to look at is the Kelsey Bowl. Jason versus Travis. And, thinking about it again, how ironic is it that the spokesman for State Farm is going to play in State Farm Stadium? And I don't know, but with recent news and recent speculation about the whole officiating this past weekend, just something to think about. I'm not one to ever promote the idea of the NFL being rigged or fixed. I hate doing that because it just ruins the fun. But after last Sunday's performance from the officiating in both the AFC and NFC championships, I don't know, just something to think about. And that's not me being bitter. Maybe a little bit. Maybe it's a little bit of me being bitter. But just something to look at, and pay attention to. The Niners, of course, we knew heading into the offseason that we were going to be losing guys, whether it was free agency or coaching. DeMeco Ryans has secured a 6-year deal with the Houston Texans to become their newest head coach, and he'll be taking our pass coordinator, I believe it was, with him. And I do expect some of our defensive free agents, like Azeez Al-Shire, maybe even Jimmy Ward, and who knows. But I do see some guys leaving. I know Robbie Gould is a free agent as well. Mike McGlinchey, free agent as well. A lot of key pieces to this Niner team over the last few years will probably be moving on. A lot of our guys that have been staples of it, like George, Fred, Bosa, Debo, they're going to stay because we have them under contract, thankfully. But a lot of those guys who, allowed depth and just further cushioned the talent, so we could, I don't want to say sustain injuries. I hate injuries, but it's like if we're going to get injuries, at least we're going to have guys to back up those bodies, So it's going to be a rough offseason. This podcast will probably more take center stage on the NBA now that is, the main sport going on. And I'm thinking about interjecting more of like my own personal thoughts and opinions on whatever's going on in the world. Primarily, this podcast was going to be more about the Niners, but given that the season's about to end, the NFL season, because clearly the Niners season's over. But, we'll see where it goes and where it evolves into next. Again, it was a tough loss. I'm looking forward to the Super Bowl. Certainly just because I'm a fan of the game. I know my brother Jared is just definitely devastated. He said right after the game, I'm not watching the Super Bowl. I'll see if he's going to hold true to that. But yeah, it's just devastating, a tough loss. And we'll see where the state of the franchise goes next. And as I'm going through it, I'm just realized I never really did a full intro for this episode because it was like an episode unlike any other. It was definitely a goodbye to the season, that is. Kind of like an exit interview or the exit, press conferences that the teams do after a season ends. But we'll see where it goes to next. And the one thing to look forward to, of course, is the ongoing storylines that the Super Bowl will be presenting. The Pro Bowl I know is coming up, and it's going to have a revamped way of doing it, as well as more activities and more competitions, which I'm a fan of. I love seeing competitions and seeing different stars interact with one another in different ways. NBA All-Star Weekend is coming up, which is always a fun time and a great time to be an NBA fan because you get to see the stars, biggest and brightest stars in the NBA. And again, the LeBron coming up closely on the record. There's a bunch of movies actually coming out, which is funny because I had just seen Avatar recently, and I wasn't really a big Avatar fan when the first one came out. It was great because of the visual effects, and the CGI was just tremendous. And I'm a fan of James Cameron because I love Terminator. Titanic is tremendous. Aliens. He's really good at making great stories and being able to translate them onto the big screen in a cinematic and masterful way. And real quick, after seeing Avatar 2, The Way of Water, I kind of watched a 10-minute recap on that first one because it's a long movie, but based off of that, I kind of think the second one was better, mostly because it was more centered towards around the tribes and the families, and it was more character-driven and character-centered. But, definitely check that out, even though I'm kind of still upset that the first Avatar beat Endgame in the highest-grossing films list. But nonetheless, I digress. I think it's a pretty damn good movie. And with Ant-Man coming up and a lot of other movies coming up, you might hear me talking about more about those experiences and seeing what's going around there. But again, regardless, I wanted to go ahead and first off, I want to thank the Niners for another, heart-filled and heartbreak of a season. I will never get tired of supporting this team, even though they like to put me and my family through misery. I love the franchise, I love the history, and I love the culture that they've been able to build since acquiring the talents of Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch. But until they are able to hoist a Lombardi trophy for the 6th time in franchise history, I will not rest, I will not be satisfied. Just like on anything I post on social media, I'm happy, but I'm never satisfied. And I will not be satisfied until we are able to see a Lombardi being hoisted up in our name. Once again, I want to go ahead and thank each and every one of you for joining me on this episode of the J Area Podcast, a sad and seldom episode of the J Area Podcast that is. But as we bring it to a close, again, I want to give major thanks to all of you listening and continue to support the podcast and everything that I do. Please, you can continue to follow me on all social media platforms at JustJose_3. Be sure to follow this podcast on Spotify or even subscribe to the YouTube channel, J Area Podcast, where you can also find each of these episodes of the show. Once again, thank you for dropping by and hanging out with us. And if you enjoy these episodes, please be sure to leave a like, comment your thoughts on how devastating of a loss the Niners had, or how much fun you had in seeing, the Niners lose. And go ahead and subscribe to the channel once again, J Area Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Jose. This has been the J Area Podcast, and we will definitely see you again soon.